This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
All right, I need an approval of the minutes of April 21st. Does anyone want to make a motion?
I move that we approve the meetings of April 21st.
I'll second.
We have a motion to approve the minutes of April 21st. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Jamie, roll call.
We need to do roll call.
Right?
I mean, I'm happy.
No, we don't. I'm sorry. All in favor? Aye.
I'll do an abstention.
As well, abstaining.
So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We do approve it because there's 5 people that say abstention for Joe and Jess.
You can still approve them if you weren't here, though.
Yeah.
You read them.
You can?
I did.
Yeah, there's
We
nothing.
did our training.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, public speak. There's no one from the public here other than people from City Space. Are you? Valley CDC quarterly report. Jamie, do you have something on that? We
Just wanted to let everyone know it was sent in and it's in the shared folder if people want to take a look at it.
And we did approve last night, City Council, the other Valley CDC Housing Assistance Program. It was approved by City Council. Account balances and open projects. This is important.
Bring it up.
I'm going to go to my Google Drive. Can you bring it up on your shared screen? All right, let me see if I can find it. Had it in here. Apologize. In my drive.
Go ahead.
Give me a second, guys. I'm going to share my screen. All right. Amy?
Should be able to.
Is it up there?
It's trying.
Nothing.
There it is. See if I can make it bigger. That help. Okay, we do have top part of the screen. Let me get it a little smaller. Shows our account balances. 1,656,000. Fund balances, which includes current fiscal year appropriations. Okay, so that's what we spent on each one of those projects, or at least committed to them. Pending earmarks are here. I do need to tell you, and I'd like a motion to do so. The Ward Avenue Rail Trail land acquisition that you see right here. See that? I just highlighted it right here. 137,500. The planning department wants to withdraw that for now, because although we definitely are going to do it, there's a lot of more negotiation going on. The cost may go from nothing possibly to paying more depending on how the negotiations go. You want to say anything to that, Jeff? Because I want to put it back in the pot.
No, I think just reiterating that the project in totality is still moving forward. It's just, it was a little premature probably to be taking that step. Things have changed. As a municipality, we're pretty slow. So when you're dealing with private landowners, that's probably not good. So things have evolved a little bit, but it's generally leaning in the positive direction. And we need about 12 months to get Mass DOT in line and get a plan set to 25%. And then that will dictate what we really need in that triangle that we're potentially to acquire. So generally it's all positive. It's just doesn't make sense to tie up that money right now.
And we don't know what the amount will be. So
Yeah, that's fact. Yeah.
I would like a motion to return the $137,500 back to the general, to our funds, and remove the Ward Avenue Rail Trail land acquisition from pending projects.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed. Okay, so that's going back in the kitty, and 12 months, hopefully we'll see it again. Now, on the bottom is our account balances. I want to go to this one, which is important because we're going to talk about this tonight, the old town hall city. You can see that there's 744,424 left in that. It's important to know that on July 1st, when the budget is approved, $250,000 is going to be put back into that, bringing it very close to 1 million again. And that's part of tonight's discussion. Okay. So, Jamie, am I correct? Is this our balance? 1,730,679.
No, that's just what's in open projects.
Okay.
The balance was on the first page.
Okay. So on the first page, this is what we have left, 11143 to be
Plus 137.
plus 13750. So that can be used for projects for the remainder of this year. Jamie, refresh my memory. When we get the match, it hasn't been applied to our budget yet, correct?
So we received the FY21 match
Right.
in FY22. We
Right.
received the FY22 match in FY23. And we usually get them around.
And that revenue is 700 some $1,000, if I recall. That's what the budget says. Or is
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Right now, they're forecasting a 35% match from the state, which is lower than what we got last year. There's currently a push to get the state legislature to commit $20 million from the surplus, I guess would be FY22 surplus, to CPA funds, but it's not.
In any case, that revenue is much larger than what we had. Previously, the match may be lower, but revenue is higher. We budgeted a lot higher, and that's important to our discussion later on this evening. Any questions about account balances? Okay, I'm going to stop the share. Let's talk about who wants to go first? Planning Department letter of support, future of elementary schools. Why don't we do that? It's on the agenda first. Do you need to share anything? You want me to just put it up? What do you want to do?
I don't need to share anything. It's easier that way.
I'd like to just, for the record, since Valley is involved in some of those discussions and potentially could be bidding on the buildings when they come out for RFP, I'm going to withdraw any votes from the proposal on the floor. But I will say that if, as an affordable housing developer, if anybody has any questions about affordable housing development, I'm happy to answer those questions in a general sense, but I will not be.
Well, here it is. Jeff, why don't you go over it? The one thing I wanted to get down to, in my view, is this part, the money. So go ahead.
Raise the money.
The money's important.
Right. So I, if it's okay, Councilor Rist or Chairperson Rist, I would just backtrack a little bit and just say that this is not a request. This is not an appropriation request at this point. This is a letter of support. The general goal of the letter of support is to be a clear signal to potential developers that the CPA committee will be ready to support a project if we can garner a developer who's going to provide affordable housing. Through discussions with Valley CDC and with other people, we have a steering committee. It's a ad hoc working group that's putting together the request for proposal as a package that is ultimately going to go to City Council. City Council has the ultimate say over the final contents of the RFP, but over the past year, the goal has been to put brains together. We have a consultant, and we actually have multiple consultants who have all been participating in this so that we can give a really well-crafted draft RFP to City Council with an explanation of some of the rationale behind it. The background information is that we did a really intensive public study in 2019 and 2020. It's the downtown plan. So we looked at the entire downtown, but it was a real focus on the schools. So that took a lot of public input. We really feel that was a really well attended series of events. We pretty much have the list of everything possible that somebody would want to see in the schools and the general nature of the downtown and the things that people are interested in seeing. Then in 2021, we did a housing production plan. So the CPA provided funding. We also had a grant. That's the document that guides the city for all of its affordable housing needs. So it does a deep dive into inventory and current, the current housing market and the demand for affordable housing. And I would hope that no one here is surprised that we need affordable housing, and we need a lot of it. That's not necessarily new. We had a 2014 housing production plan that called for the same things. So the schools, the elementary schools, were specifically sort of addressed in that plan. We also looked at some of the larger parcels. So the Tasty Top parcel, for example, and there's another parcel that's for sale on Main Street, close to Southampton. Those are in the housing production plan. So that's a guiding document. And then we had the reuse committee. Joe McCoy is the chair of the committee. He's here. And we've been working for over a year with a consultant who happens to be just outside of Boston. But Emily Ennis and her firm was the same firm, or she departed from the firm who did the downtown strategic plan. So she has sort of that hands-on knowledge of all the previous work. So the committee has been meeting to draft the RFP, and we've gotten a lot of input from a variety of sources. And I think the message, part of the message going to City Council and for the public is that we have an opportunity with the 3 elementary schools to get something special. And affordable housing has just risen to the top. After the pandemic, it's actually been more of a need. But with all that said, we need to be doing everything possible to make the sites appealing. And it's not to be understated that we, as a municipality, the equivalent of begging, we need to be close to that. We need to be setting up the schools so that they are really enticing. We need to be asking people to invest in Easthampton, because these projects, any one of the schools to convert to affordable housing is going to be millions and millions of dollars of investment. So we really need to be doing everything we can. And I really feel like as a group so far, we have done that. And some of the work that Valley CDC has provided is kind of in the form of a fit test. So they looked at the school buildings to determine the approximate number of units that might fit there. We are also partnering with Mass Development. We applied for a grant, we didn't get it, and Mass Development came back to us and said, we still want to help you. So we are investigating the infrastructure around the schools, because I think in particular around Maple Street, the water sewer infrastructure is old and is likely in need of repair or upgrade to support a development. We're looking at the sidewalks, which are all very old. The crosswalks are not up to ADA standards. So we are getting existing condition survey of the school properties, because we don't know where any of the property lines are. And we also got existing condition survey of all the neighborhoods, because and it took a while, but learning that you can't propose a new sidewalk or a new crosswalk if you don't have the existing condition surveys completed. So we are gathering all this information in an attempt to make the properties look enticing for people to consider. Valley prepared a sample pro forma, and so that's the chart that's up on the screen here. There's a big asterisk on this one. This is the center school, and I think the arrangement for this pro forma shows an addition. So there's the existing brick building. These numbers do include a significant addition to the side of the building. Don't know if that is really going to be part of what we see. But I think regardless, if you look at these numbers and under sources, the phraseology is a capital stack. This is the way that a developer, especially an affordable housing developer, would need to approach these properties. And we're talking big numbers for federal and state dollars, tax credits, and other programs, and all the way down to CPA. So the number that's charted out, is an approximate figure that we want to be aware of. That's one school, and we have three. And one of the goals we have, one of the potential best case scenarios, is that if a developer could take all three at once and relieve the city of the responsibilities of those buildings. So if you add up that number times three, we're talking about a significant potential investment from CPA. And that's where there's so many unknowns. So we're not asking for an appropriation. We're not asking necessarily for that dollar amount to be in your letter of support. But I think what we want to have is this letter come from CPA, be addressed to the mayor, to say that the CPA committee really wants to be at the table to support the creation of affordable housing. And the hope is that letter, the letter will be an appendices in the RFP. And the hope is that it's a signal to a developer to have them know that the CPA committee has talked about this at least a little bit and will be sort of ready to participate financially. Jess did offer to speak. I don't know if you want to, Jess, but I think I did try to put in the cover letter that at the very end, it's the second to last sentence, is the request could take the shape of a multi-year appropriation, a single appropriation, or even bonding. Some people we've discussed this with, we're very happy to know that the CPA has bonded for a project already. All of
We haven't yet, but we hope to.
Right, or at least has considered it. All of this needs to be positioned that we don't know how this will take shape, and it could take shape sometime in the next 12 months if we're lucky and get a developer or set of developers in the first round. Then within the next 12 months, I would imagine that there would be a very specific conversation between the CPA and the developer or the city to give details back up and understand what the money would be going towards. I think the last thing is that the state, so DHCD, sort of expects the municipality to be doing this. And so that's kind of why I'm here now. I'm happy to answer questions. Jess could probably add, contribute, and subtract things I said, but the moment of time for us right now is to get the letter submitted in with the RFP. That's the action. And my understanding from the CPA is that it's an opportunity for the CPA to actually put money towards building some affordable units. So I think with that, I'll stop and see if there's questions.
I can tell you that the city council absolutely wants this to happen. And I think the CPA committee understands, and all of you understand, that affordable housing is one of the primary tenets of our work. So I have no problem if this gets to $1 million over time. I'm hoping we don't have to bond because that means interest, but it would be short term. But I don't think, in my view, that the dollars should be an impediment to this letter of support. We don't know what they're going to be yet. And there's other projects coming our way. So we don't know what kind of cash we'll have on hand at the time this happens. We're looking for, I think what Jeff's looking for is, yes, the CPA is committed to affordable housing and for these schools. Jeff, can I just ask you, if you develop a letter that you feel is appropriate for the CPA, can we approve it in the June meeting? Only because I don't know how to word this now.
I did submit on the last page.
Oh, you did?
I submitted a sample. I mean,
Oh, maybe I should read it.
I will say before you read it, it was intended to be not binding, but a signal. And so you could wordsmith this, but I did try to set forth what I would think someone might want to see. Looking at
Okay, I have to say that I just got this last night. A lot of the committee just got this because it was late getting to us, so I apologize, but you can all read this. What do y'all think? I don't know why that blew out.
I just had a question.
Go ahead, Scott.
Thank you for all of that, and I am fully in support of creating more affordable housing. One thing I was wondering is, has there been has the committee, the reuse committee, reached any sort of formal conclusion of the preferred path that has been made public? Like, this is what we want to do with Maple School. This is what we want to do with Center School. This is what we want to do with Pepin. Has that happened yet?
Jeff, you want to answer that? Let me to answer that.
Want to try?
Sure. Okay, I'll give it a try. Yeah, I mean, I think RFPs actually have changed a little bit, which is nice since the first time I was on, did them with City Council. And a lot of these things are rated more favorable, not so favorable. And so, as you can imagine, the number of suggestions of things that people would like to see in the community. And so the consultant worked with us to create very favorable, affordable housing, very favorable. And I don't know if it's going to be a point system or what, but you get X money. And then there's been obviously been a talk about a gymnasium space, and can that be done? That might be favorable. And so it's all these sort of pluses and minuses, but a lot of it was, taken from a combination of public hearings and from downtown strategic meetings Jeff mentioned. And did I answer your question?
So I guess like you mentioned, like the gymnasium space, is there? I guess no. I guess the answer, have you answered my question? No. I guess is there like?
It's a ranking system.
Yeah. So we have. Yeah. So the RFP, I believe, is pretty much put together, and it's probably available to see, I assume. So you can see what the ranking has been, and then this is being handed over to City Council, the Property Subcommittee, and the City Council in general, for them to look through it and probably have more public discussions and things of sort. But right now, if you want to see the document, all the rankings and weighting of potential uses are on a document.
And I have two, because I think I can try to answer the question too, which is that it has been identified. I think it's identified in the RFP that the highest objective, the highest goal, the highest priority, is the creation of affordable housing. That's identified pretty clearly that is the highest priority. And then the secondary priority is community benefits. So that's kind of, we created a term to capture something like the gymnasium, something like public parking, and then something like a park or a playground. And those were identified, those came out really loud and clear out of the visioning sessions, that those were the most desirable community benefits. But I think the thing for us to be realistic about is that we could ask for it to be a mixed use building with bars and, a theater and all kinds of public open space. But the reality is that there's not a market for that. The likelihood that we will get a developer to privately fund the creation of that in this day and age is so low that we wanted to try to raise up affordable housing operators. There are funding sources for that that the community needs. So that was the focus, is that we did not tailor this and ask for specific uses of specific buildings.
I have a question. Harry, I'll get to you. The quantity of units, is that a high priority? Because to me, that should be in a sense, and I'll speak to that at the city council level, but I'm wondering, Joe and Jeff, they get a lot of points if they say, hey, if we knock the buildings down, and I'll say that right out loud, we can give you 25 more units than if we're forced to use the building. And I'm curious where that discussion is, or whether the RFP will have that flexibility.
Yep, flexibility is key. So as it will get submitted to city council, that flexibility will be there. With regard to demolition, in the notion of it, there are some things that we would expect if the buildings were demolished. So an increase in the sustainability or the sustainable design components of the building is higher.
Right.
Expectation is higher.
Good.
The number of units is expected to be higher if you're going to do that. And the one thing that we worked in, because it came up, is that would require some kind of community meeting. So the developer who's proposing that, if they're selected, would need to go to the community, hold some kind of meeting to show what the design look like, goals of the building, the height. And the reason why I'm just saying that is because if you're taking the existing buildings and you're converting them to affordable housing, we don't need you to do any of that, because that would be, or Jess was reacting to that, but you have to do less. The bar is lower.
You still have the permit.
You have to get a permit, yes. So you don't have to have an extra design meeting. The expectation for meeting like LEED certification, we don't want to burden someone who's trying to take buildings, convert them, and set the bar unattainably high.
So you
My only-
say it's an easier path if you buy the building, renovate the building versus tear the building down.
Correct.
It's the easier path, but to me, it's what's economically feasible for the developer. I mean, if the developer says, look, I can get 25 more units in here, and if you let me have 10% market, I can give you a lot more affordable units. To me, that's where the question would be. But for me, saving the buildings isn't as important to me as how many units. But if it's economically more feasible to save the buildings, then we do it. I mean, I think getting it done is about the developer's economics. I mean, that's just me. Harry, you had your hand up, and then I'll go.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, what happened to Barton Street School?
Parson,
Didn't Easthampton sell that school to a private developer?
right? And
And then they go ahead and make condos out of it?
they had market rate apartments in it, yeah.
So what's more feasible, selling the building to somebody else or the city pour all kinds of money into it? I mean, what's the catch there?
I'm not sure what your question is.
I think what he's trying to say is rather than having somebody come to CPA and asking for money and just selling it for market rate units rather than affordable units, because then there's no CPA money going into it. Is that,
Right.
am I
Yeah,
understanding you, Harry?
that's the drift. Yeah.
Well, one of our goals here is affordable housing. That's why we're sitting here. It's one of our 4 things, so.
I'm just trying to reiterate what.
I know.
I mean, to me, if the RFP has affordable housing at the top, it better have market rate at the bottom. Because to me, that's not in the city's best interest. We need housing really bad. So that's just my point of view. I don't know if it comes back to the city, but if it comes back to the city council and someone wants to put in 70% market rate, I wouldn't vote for it. I want
Well,
to,
why couldn't you sell it to a developer who wants to put in low-income housing?
I don't know, Harry, that's far
You
off.
can do that with a deed restriction, right? That they have to do low-income housing.
Restrict the building before it gets sold?
Yeah, before it gets sold, and sell it to them and put a deed restriction on it that it has to be a certain percentage of affordable housing.
Aren't those already out there?
Make it complicated, but yeah.
But
Don't they already do that?
don't we already do that? Like it's at
You would
Cottage
do
Street?
that as part of the, so as part of the project, if you're publicly funded subsidies through DHCD, first of all, they want to see that the municipality has put local dollars in before they'll even consider it. So that to have the local money in first is huge. And you have to have site control. So you can't even go to the table at DHCD until you have site control and some commitment from the community. So, what was your question? It's been a long day.
Deed restriction. Can you do a deed restriction that it has to be a
Would
percentage?
happen as part of the whole process. So
Right.
you get financing from DHCD, you go through your closing process, you will have an affordable housing restriction that's placed on the property before you even begin
Right,
construction.
because I thought part of the Cottage Street project was deed restricted to that company in Boston or something like
It was, but that happened during the closing process.
Okay.
So that happened and then they constructed units.
Okay.
So you
All right.
can't close on your financing unless that affordable
see.
housing
Okay.
restriction's in place. Yep.
Scott, you had a question?
Just to clarify, so is it 1 RFP or 3 RFPs?
So the structure is 1 RFP, and under the idea of flexibility, you could pick one building and you can submit for that. However, in this, trying to make this the best situation for Easthampton, it is, it's desirable, so it's in the ranking criteria, it's ranked high if a developer could take all 3.
I know And then my second question, because I hear what you're saying as far as the market for things that are more mixed use and that might have more community development is low. Was there discussion of like, I guess where I'm really thinking about is playgrounds, is like, I know that there's a big emotional attachment to at least the Maple playground, like to saying there's an RFP for, or because the city could just keep that part, like where the playground is, for instance, and say the RFPs, like that's a way to remove the need for a market-driven solution to keeping that amenity, and then having an RFP for the rest in a way. If what we're hearing is that affordable housing is up here and then a notch below but still high is community benefit, the thing you lump together is community benefit. I want as much affordable housing as possible, and I wouldn't want that next year to get lost, especially because I think it'll help sell the whole project with people.
Yeah, so, it's probably worth, I understood that this could happen, so there's a little bit more about the RFP and the nature of the RFP than hopefully the letter of support, but one of the things that we did with mass development was we did the survey work, and we also did a concept plan. The idea of a fit test with the site. So what it shows is that it is feasible to preserve the buildings, provide tenant parking, provide a playground, and provide public parking. So there's this opportunity in the best case scenario where a developer will provide the public playground and ideally provide public parking, and then get everything that they need for their residential development. I think the important thing that kind of Harry's point is the community from the downtown plan and the housing production plan would say, we do not want these to be market rate housing. Because if that's what we want, then all we're going to get is some tax revenue, and we might get a little bit of money when we sell the buildings, but we're going to get market rate housing, which is not what we want. So we're trying to flip that around to try as hard as we can in this first round to get affordable housing as the first project that comes forward.
I just want to kind of get us back to the letter. I think there's no doubt this committee wants this to happen. And we're a long way off from how much is it going to cost. We don't know that, because we have to get it. They have to declare surplus. We have to get the RFP out. The developer has to come forward. And all this is doing is generating the fact that CPA will do. So unless there's a lot of other discussion, I think this letter is fine. Do we have any comments on the letter you're worried about?
Can I just ask one quick question? So basically, in theory, what you're doing is you are setting the city up to be able to compete against the developer, right? Someone who wants to do market rate housing, making it more attractive for someone that wants to do lower income housing versus a guy that wants to come in here and build condos.
Yes.
Basically, that's what this is trying to do.
Yes. And we don't believe this is, we don't believe we're being naive in thinking that this is a possibility. I think that there's a real possibility. The dollars out there, if someone can make it work, the timeline is, that's an issue, but there's been a variety of exercises to make sure people are aware that this is coming up and happening. So, we may get nothing.
Right.
But that we want to make sure that when we release this RFP, that it's flexible, it's honest, and that it's like something that a developer could really look at and be like, okay, this works. Because what the feedback we got was other communities can make their RFPs overly complicated, and that's difficult. And then, I do want to say this, Chairman Rist, this is a good practice run to have these conversations, but we have one more thing that we think as a community we need to probably be offering, which is to potentially give the properties to a developer. So we are really trying to come to the table with offering the property, offering CPA money, and having done all this preparatory work to make this a package, something that.
In other words, the acquisition being $1.
Yeah, right.
We want people to, because Jess, maybe, I don't know if you would say it this way, but
mean, I can speak to the pro forma if you
If we
need to.
expect, and there is an appraisal, so we need to be aware that there are some dollars attached to this, but if we expect as a community to get $1 million, the only way we're gonna get $1 million is if we're selling these as condominiums that none of us are gonna be able to. And that's the community decision that city council is gonna have to make, is what do we want to try to do right now?
Well, I can tell you there's a lot of support for exactly this. And I haven't heard anybody, there might be one or two councilors that want to make money off of these buildings. Not many, and I know the mayor doesn't. So yes, we sell them for $1, which is attractive to the developer. They don't have to pay for the buildings to start thinking about redevelopment.
But we do have to carry the carrying costs while we're doing pre-development, getting financing. So there's several years of carrying a building.
Carrying is keeping them and maintaining them.
Yes, which has
keeping the heat on.
an expense to
It's a
it.
murder,
There's an expense to that. So
The city understands that, I'm sure. Scott.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify the reason I wanted to get more info on that and make that clear is because I don't think we need to modify this letter, but I don't want it to be read that the CPA committee is voting for affordable housing at the expense of any of the other ideas in the community, like saying that I don't want this to be read saying, we want to make sure there's not a playground. We want to make sure there's not a library. We want to make sure there's not a gym. We only want this to be affordable housing. You know what I mean? I don't want that to be read that way.
I don't think the letter reads that.
And I don't think it does either. I think someone could potentially say that. And I want to make sure that that's public, that that's not what that voting for this is not saying.
Okay,
Because
in the minutes.
because it's embedded in the RFP that the playground is really listed as a desirable community benefit. So if someone ignores that, and doesn't propose that, if there's someone who has that component, they're going to rank higher. So the community playground idea and public parking too. So in the fit test, there's 15 public parking spaces that are shown on that plan for Maple, and there's 15 public parking spaces that are, shown on the plan for Center, just to demonstrate that it is possible, and to kind of set a little bit of the expectation. The last thing I did want to add is that the library recently voted to not pursue these buildings as part of another location, and it was an attempt to be clear to the community that they are looking at funding. The state funding source for libraries has a 5 to 7 year or longer window, and they don't fund renovated buildings. And the library letter, and it's going to come forward, it's going to be part of the RFP and awareness for people, is that they do not have the ways and means to take these properties and hold them for 5 to 7 years. So as a kind of to offer clarity to the community so that city council doesn't get, that question. The other thing real quick is that no city department wants these buildings. No city department can take these buildings and the responsibility that comes with them, paying over $100,000 a year. And the carrying costs is, and then if we look at Old Town Hall as an example of upgrade if necessary to change from school to something else, just become very heavy burdens that lead us all in this direction where we are.
I saw Joe's hand up for.
Yeah, no, I just, and quickly, I mean, I think it just speaks to the passion of what people in this committee have, but I think so many times it's so easy for CPA to leave their lane, and I think, as I said, that letter is non-judgmental or not promoting anything, but really our purpose is just to say we would support such a project. But as far as it's great discussion, but as everything is playgrounds, that's property and subcommittee. We got to be careful that we're not making judgments of what you're going to do with the property if I'm going to sign on that letter, because that's not our lane. We should say, is this something that we support? Yes, and it can go through city council, can go through property, they can argue what it's going to be, but we have to be careful we don't get pulled into that whirlpool.
can I just also make a comment on the public amenities piece of it, in that as an affordable housing developer, you put a budget together and you put in things like playgrounds and other things like that. And when your construction pricing comes in, and it's $2 million over what you budgeted, the first thing that gets valued engineered is the playgrounds. So, you know, I think it's important to think about the flexibility of a developer as they're heading into this process, is that if affordable housing is the priority, that is the priority. And they may be offering to do some other amenities with that. But when push comes to shove 2.5 years later and the pricing, I mean, we've seen construction pricing out of control right now. It is all over the place. And budgets that were crafted 1.5 years ago are $5 million over what they were budgeted. So, you know, I think it's just important to keep that in mind, that some of those things that could be committed to now during an RFP process may end up having to be, you know, valued engineered out at the end of the day. And so just a forewarning, that's all.
I think the language, rather large sums is pretty accurate. I'm in support of this letter. I'd like to conclude this conversation. I don't see any reason to change the language in the letter. Does anybody see that? Because I feel it's
Concerns.
Then I'll take a motion to approve the letter as written and to be sent to the mayor.
A motion to support the letter of support.
Second.
We have a motion to approve this letter of support. Any further discussions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Abstain.
Jess abstains. Thank you, Jeff. That satisfies.
Does, may I offer the quick update on the skate park and then
I
think I can do.
Okay, I didn't want to lose my temper, but go ahead.
I just wanted to, I think it's on the agenda, and I just wanted to tell the
it is.
that.
Oh, my.
It is.
We came to the committee for design funds for a skate park. And at the time, we were looking at the back of the basin and behind the police station. But I did want to say that the site is shifting. And I wanted to make sure that the CPA committee is okay with that and understands that although we were looking at that site and we came from the design funds, that you're supportive of the design fund portion continuing. That's kind of why I just wanted to make sure that was understood and that was okay with the committee. Is that
In other words, the design funds are not wasted. You can continue to use them at a new site.
correct?
Can you just give like 30 seconds of why that?
18 words or less of why this site was bought.
We, unbeknownst to us, that when we went to the environmental consultant, they sort of quickly found that the site is listed as a formerly contaminated site.
Oh, really?
Which I was not aware of otherwise. We probably would not have done it right away.
Sure.
Only the portion of the site where the building was built was evaluated, and then the back area was not. And so the primary concern is that it would be very expensive to be testing the location. And then even after that, the consultant was worried that when you go into construction, you would still be vulnerable to hitting spots during construction. And you know, we always knew that it was close to the pond, so wetlands we were aware of that. But when you add in stormwater, and the police and fire departments did not want us to be going behind the building, no path, no skate park behind the building. So all those factors kind of started to push it so much so that it wasn't viable. We are having a pretty good collaborative conversation with the Parks Department right now to see if there's another viable alternative, but that's what the design funds are going towards, is to figure out a spot.
I think the main thing is we're not losing the design funds.
Correct.
They are going to be,
How much has been expended so far?
well, we already have the design, correct?
Now we have, and the consultant has offered to continue to work off the same contract. So I'd say we're spent, I'm not good at percentages,
Like half or?
15, 20% at this point.
Okay, yeah.
And we've already shifted to evaluate a couple other sites, and we have one in mind. So there's some money spent on that. If the sites all fail, I do not think we would spend all the money, but I think we would know that before we spend all the funds. So
Okay, thank you for that update.
thank you.
Burns, you want to sit at the head of the table, and are you did you get into the meeting?
I did. I'm in the meeting.
Can you make her a co-host? Can you maybe be at the head of the table so that the camera picks you up better?
Sure. Yes. some expertise here. Yeah. This is Peggy Tarnowski over here. On board.
Thank you. So,
Are you able to share or is it blocking you?
It's blocking.
why does it block you? You can only have one co-host?
No, I'm trying to figure this out. I'm sorry.
I can share it, but that becomes a problem.
Try it now.
Now I can.
I hope people had a chance to read this. I know it came in late, but we were able to get the application. It says planning shared. Is that you, Jamie?
Yeah, that's this computer.
Okay, but why? There she goes.
Hello. Good to see you again. I feel like we're going to be seeing a lot more of each other. We're really excited to be here tonight to present this application
Can you speak up or maybe can we push that down to?
for the Old Town Hall, the second floor transformation. I thought tonight what we could do, we've submitted our application for the 3.25 billion, which is a significant amount of money, and we don't want to take that lightly. So I thought what might be a good idea is to do a refresher on the project, a quick refresher, because we're all familiar with it. We've spent a lot of time, a number of years with it. But I thought sort of the salient points you could speak to, some of the changes that have happened along the way. So just to start off, we're all familiar with this building here. It's the Old Town Hall. It's located in the historic Main Street district, right in the entry point of the downtown. And it was built in 1869. It's a historic building, and the city offices left when, right?
2003.
2003. It wasn't until 2006 that City Space came along and said, you know, we want to start a nonprofit and make this an arts hub. And it took a while really for us to get to the point where we are, because what we did was we maintained the first floor. And the CPA along the way has been a big part of that. You know, it's been a community project from day one. We restored, this didn't happen until 2014 when we restored the first floor entryway. State funding and CPA funding helped make this happen. But before that, arts organizations like Big Red Frame, Easthampton City Arts were really enlivening the first floor with arts and events that happen all year round. So they have really been the point, the sort of cornerstone of making that a hub. Last year, as you might remember, the CPA also helped to reinvest in the building with the renovations of the first floor and the back area where Flywheel was, now called the Blue Room. And we use this space all the time now. We have performances, rehearsals, meetings, all kinds of things are happening here. And it's really become a new hub within the building. And so the CPA has been a part of that. As you know, the second floor is just sitting there. It is this beautiful space that is in a prime location in a city that has limited available build out space. And here we are just sitting on this property, but we can't use it because it's not accessible. When we thought of this project, it wasn't until, you know, I think we had a meeting with about 50 artists who came together and said, we want City Space to take this on. Remember, we rented that first floor, the first floor spaces and rented out the building. And we went to, so when the artist came to us and said, you know, we want you to move forward with this project, we said, okay, well, we're going to do this. We're going to start applying for grants. Our first grant was an MCC grant for a systems replacement plan, then a feasibility study for that second floor in 2015. In 2017, thanks to the CPA, and the Massachusetts Cultural Council, we got some funding for the CD, DD, and SD designs for the project. And that was that 2018 designs that we're still working with today. And it's pretty simple. If we look at those designs, they're not very complicated. They take the simplicity of the space and make it usable for a flexible use space for 350 seats. If you look at the sort of back area, key points to this design are that we are adding accessible restrooms, HVAC, which we'll note is going to be very important in a couple of days, and Saturday when it gets very hot. Our HVAC system is non-existent up there. It'll allow for storage so that seating and stage and risers can be put away, because we did a lot of studies within the region, and artists and those that will be using the space said, we want to use this in all kinds of configurations. We want a proscenium stage. We want a complete open space. We want to have meetings. We want to have performances. We want to have a movie night. We want to have a tabling event. We want to have a wedding. We want to do everything in this space. So that's kind of how we've come about this. Now, the most important aspect of this project is right where that white thing is. You know, you can see the elevator. What is that thing? Is that the camera? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the elevator, as you can see here, is a little off kilter. That's in the original design. And the elevator goes from basement to balcony, because in the balcony, we will have tech as well as some additional seating. And in the basement, we'll have storage. And along the way, one of the most important discussions has been accessibility is creating universal design for all people and giving access to the spaces that we are making use of. That elevator shifted a little bit, and the design went face forward to the street, as you can see. One of the reasons why this happened, and Mike, you can correct me here, is essentially align it with, I can hear myself there. It'll align it with the building. It won't cover any additional windows, and essentially will cost less. It'll be a little differential. I think the Mass Historic Commission said it'll be differential design and not take away from the historic design, the original design of the building.
Complement the building as opposed to try to compete with it.
Yeah. The entryway is here, so folks can come in through that. If you can imagine being on the street, on the crosswalk, you would walk in right here and you could take a right and go up the stairs, or you could go straight and go onto the elevator and go up to all floors. So that floor that's right there, you could go to the first floor and to the performance space that'll be on the second floor, as well as the balcony. The performance space essentially will be set up with risers as well as a stage that can be taken down or put up. As far as sound and working within the space, it has a lot of live sound. So you can see that there's some closures on the window that'll black out the space, as well as help with the sound elements. There will be sound baffling on the ceiling. We do have to take down the ceiling completely and put it back up. There's asbestos glue on the underside of some of the tiles on the ceiling. And in order to put a lighting grid up top, as well as some sound baffling, we have to take that down and put it back up. There was also, that came towards the end of the project, there was some concerns after the ceiling fell in the Easthampton Congregational Church of of that potentially happening with any kind of longevity within the building.
There is failure of the keying in the existing ceiling now. And so the concern is, as we do construction work in there, it's just going to break more of the keying and the ceiling would become fragile. And so that was included in what we submitted to Mass Historic, and the replacement ceiling will have the same look and feel of what's there, but it'll be a modern material.
We had another meeting with performing arts organizations after we developed this plan, as well as our business plan, because not only are we planning for the architectural upgrades to the building and to make it accessible, but we have a business plan in place so that it's financially feasible to run the space, as well as sustainable. These 75 artists and performing arts groups came together and they told us a couple of things. One of them was, we think this is too high and maybe you could reprice this, really simple things that were helpful. But also they helped us to look at the back stairs area that is connected to the Blue Room. We weren't going to open that space up and reconnect those stairs, but they said, actually, we might want to use both spaces at the same time. There will be some sound challenges in the building with using the first floor and the second floor space. So ideally, if somebody wanted to use both spaces at the same time, that would be great. If you can imagine something like the Nutcracker or a large party, you might want two separate spaces that separates like a prep area or a rehearsal area. So that would allow for that. Accessibility would still be in the front of the building with the elevator. This also allowed for additional green room space, less office, because we realized we don't need as much office space. And then the storage area can also be used once emptied out as an additional green room space. So essentially, the building is still as it is. It's still a beautiful space that has these stained glass windows and mahogany wood aspects. We would be keeping the wall that you see at the back. That's where the storage area would be. And the doors would stay, they're existing. Anything we move, we have to either put on show or we have to replace with historic standards, according to Mass Historic Preservation Standards. From 2019 to 2022, we did a lot of things. So we created a long-term lease with the city of Easthampton. Did I mention that this is a building that's owned by the city of Easthampton? It is. So I just want to remind you. So we have a long-term lease, a 44-year lease, which is a long story I won't get into. Why 44 years? The CPA committed $3 million to this project. Thank you very much. That's been instrumental. We began endowment planning as part of the campaign. We had a $500,000 individual come forward. A $200,000 grant from the MCC arrived. We are expending that as part of our phase 1 in the project. City Space received historic credit allocations of $550,000. We can get up to $750,000. This we will see after the project. We can sell those tax credits and it'll go directly back into the building. We have a state economic bill that's in the State House. This was introduced. This for $750,000. And Easthampton CPA is designated, I believe in July, $1 million towards that from that $3 million pledge. So I just want to reiterate the importance of the investment of the CPA has been long part of this project. So as where we are right now, we're preparing the CPA, working with you with this application for readying for construction. We are looking to go out to bid at the beginning of 2023. So we're trying to get everything in order before we get to that point. We still have some funds to raise as part of this project, but our understanding with conversations with Jamie and the mayor and Chairman Rist is that it'll take some time for the decision-making process of how the CPA wants to move forward with supporting this project. We are advocating for the economic development earmark that is ongoing, as well as for the rest of the year. We have a couple of grants that are coming forward that are quite significant. We are applying for several state grants, one-stop grants that have upwards of $800,000 and each, as well as additional grants and foundation funding, and continuing our fundraising, as we've talked about, in a lot of diverse methods. And then we're also doing outreach in the community. So, the way that this fundraising has happened and worked well is that, we've raised over $1.4 million beyond the CPA pledge. And, that's a significant amount of money. And how we've received that is through state funding, foundation funding, individual funding. And as the momentum grows, we continue to ask for that funding from those diverse areas. We have a lot lined up this year within those funding methods, including foundations, state grants, and individual donors. The costs have shifted a little bit. So we were set at a $6.9 million project, but each year that this project continues, inflation goes up. And this is significant. We started this project in the construction plans ended in 2018. We completed them. And in each year, we see an increase from 5 to 8%. The estimated, if you look at your application, we've broken down what's eligible and what's not. So if we look at these costs here, the total costs that are eligible from the CPA do not include operations and endowment, as well as theater equipment and FF&E takeaways, essentially. So the estimated costs that are eligible from the CPA are a little over $5 million. The total of estimated costs that are construction costs are 6.6, and ineligible are 1.5. Our committed sources of funding is growing, and I've talked a little bit about that, but as we are receiving funding from businesses, individuals, foundations, and state funding especially. As you know, with the expending of the Massachusetts Cultural Council Cultural Facilities Fund $200,000 funding from phase 1, which we are doing right now, we will be applicable to apply for additional funds from the Massachusetts Cultural Council. We have these pending sources of funding, which will go above the goal that we're looking to get to. So in order for the construction costs, we're looking at a little over $6 million to get started, right, Mike?
Yeah, about 6.6, I think.
6.6. We were at 5.9, but with the inflation cost, that's the reality of the changing scope of the project, or I should say the changing cost. The scope is still the same. The timeline, so we're looking to end out the capital campaign phase at the end of this year, and construction administration will begin in really at the beginning of next year. So, and it'll take about 12 to 18 months for the construction of the project. Believe it or not, the Old Town Hall was actually built in 1 year, the entire building, but this project will take about 1 year and a little some.
It's more like Rome.
Right. They didn't have electricity then. And then some post-construction, including theatrical equipment and, of course, the opening celebration. I do want to mention that obviously we're asking for additional funding for this. There has been $3 million pledged from the CPA, and we have expended, or we will be expending a little over 250,000. We're asking for an additional 250 for this expanded inflation cost that we're seeing. I know that as part of what Jeff was talking about and what Jess was mentioning, the construction costs are just outrageous. We will see what our first floor phase project was. It's actually has been really helpful and informative in sort of how this project will function. And we'll see how the costs are adjusted. We are getting a cost estimate from our architects, Coombe Riddle Architects. We had a meeting this morning, And she suggested we wait till after the summer because construction costs will be very high right now and might see some lowering after the summertime.
I have a few things.
Yes, please.
Could you stop sharing?
Yes.
First of all, what they're asking for, to be clear, is 3.5 million, not just 3. I want to share with you a possible funding scenario. As I spoke with Jamie today, there's a lot of ways this can be funded, but bonding is a big part of it. I'm going to share my screen. So if you look at this, I put this together only as a scenario that tries to explain where we're at. You can see this, let me get a paper. So, first of all, I talked to Mike Owens today, which is an important conversation because I was concerned, and Mike, you were aware of this, that you couldn't go out to bid until all the funding was in place, which would delay it completely. But that's not the case. He said, yes, you can go out to bid. You simply can't sign a contract and start using the money until all your funding's in place, which is what City Space said in their letter. That's important. I believe you'd go out to bid once the bonding is secured, which how long that takes. Okay? That makes sense, Mike?
We can go out to bid once the city council votes the funding.
Right.
Whether the city has bonded it or not is really not our concern.
I was about to say that. Yes, you're correct. How we go about funding it has nothing to do with City Space. It's our choice, and we need some information. So just to go over this cost analysis, we already gave City Space $250 out of our retained match account. When the budget turns over July 1st, that $1 million again is in that account. That's part of it. That's where the 1 million is on my screen here. If we bond 2 million, it has always been my thought, and Greg Rowland, I talked to him at length yesterday. He's on the Cape today. He's, although he's in the private, I don't know, Mike, if you know him, he's got a lot of experience in private sector bonding. His feeling is 250,000 per year on a 10-year note would be good. My feeling for the city CPA to properly budget year by year is to structure that debt so we make the same payment every year. So we know it's going to cost 250. We've been setting aside 250. And so I'm looking at that as a figure to put into the budget each year to pay the mortgage, to pay the bond. The new appropriation of 250,000, this is new, that would come out of the undesignated fund. Now, this is going to take some time to get going. That may not happen this year. The very important thing to understand is, and Greg made this really clear, is we have to meet with the city treasurer and bond counsel and figure out how this bond is going to be structured. Can we do what we want to do? Can it be a credit line? I don't know if it can, but that would help with how the money's doled out. The other thing that concerns me is, when is our first payment due? If the bond is approved and closed February 1st, is the first payment due in January? Well, that's not part of our current budget. So we have, in March, that would be something to consider. So that's how this committee has to make a decision based on what that bond counsel says. So the timeline for this is this. If you approve myself and Greg and Jamie and the mayor and bond counsel meeting tonight, we're going to come back to you for the June meeting and finalize this with information on how this bond is going to be set up and what it's going to cost and what the market is doing. It may be, the mayor feels, in fact, she said this, I think, to Burns, that this is a good time to do this. I want to hear from bond counsel that that's the case. If bond counsel says you're going to pay a lot more now, you might as well wait 2 months, then we wait 2 months. The interest on the bond is big, and then we don't want to pay more. So that's how That's the information everybody needs. We need to know what our choices are. Maybe it's cheaper to start out with a lower payment and go further. Okay, I don't know these answers. But Greg was clear to me that if you don't have those answers, you should not vote. We're not voting on this tonight, everybody. We're going to get information. All I need from you is, yes, let's do this. Now, the extra 250, we may not need that until next year because we don't know when construction. As construction, and Mike, you know this as a project manager, the money is doled out as the construction happens. You don't give them $3 million or $6 million right off the top, correct?
That's correct, but if I can remind you that we can't sign a contract unless the funds are in place.
But
The city doesn't have to have the money in the bank. You know, you could have a bond that's structured to go out 6 months from now or whatever. But until we have a city council signed appropriation, we don't have the funding.
That's exactly right. And
So
if you look at,
all of it needs to be authorized before we can sign a contract.
absolutely. And if you look at my timing here, the meeting with the bond council will happen before next meeting. Our next meeting is June 16th. That's the decision today. City council receives the appropriation at the July 6th meeting. Unfortunately, the city council, well, from my point of view, fortunately, the city council meets once a month. At the July 6th meeting, it's sent to finance committee. Big meeting. We'll need Burns and Mike and anybody from CPA at that meeting to explain this bond and the rest of it. Because the city, I am going to ask for a final approval on August 3rd. Burns mentioned that she could wait till September. I'd like to get it done in August because once September rolls around, the city council gets busier. And this will be a big discussion. So my hope is a public hearing happens on August 3rd and the funding is done. Once the bond is authorized, the treasurer is required to go out and figure out how to do it. And it may be that between our conversation with the bond consultant in the next month and once the bond is authorized, maybe it changes. Well, we always have the right to make decisions. Now, this money, once it's secured, we'll put the 1 million, we'll put the $2 million bond into the construction account. But the grant agreement that has to be signed with the auditor will state that no money gets expended until City Space has funds, matching funds in place. So we're not risking giving them money and the project falling apart.
And so does the match money get spent first? So I'm just thinking
Depends on the source.
yeah, because in my world, we're always sending out non-interest money first, then hitting sources that, hitting a construction.
And when the bond is going to be approved and if we can delay it, so you can use the other money, the $1 million we already have in the bank and the other source.
So it's committed and it's there. I guess I just don't want to draw down on a source that has an interest associated to it if they're willing to spend their other sources first, but I don't know if that's an option.
Well, we would spend whatever liquid sources exist.
Right.
Exactly.
The part of the problem will be if there's significant grant funds, we have to be able to upfront the money. And so if we have a promise for $4 million, but only 500,000 is liquid,
right,
and we get a $600,000 bill,
right,
I can't pay it.
Right.
So there needs to be discussion about what's flexible, but we would spend liquid first because we have to pay the bill before we can even submit for reimbursement. The city doesn't cut a check till after we pay.
Right.
And
We
so
would ask the city council for the 1 million for the entire 3.25.
yeah, my suggestion, please have these conversations internally or whatever, get authorization for the total.
Absolutely.
And then internally, the city can figure out where we're going to take it from, how much has to be bonded, how much can wait. If you were thinking, well, gee, 250,000 probably become available in March or April, well, then you could take that into consideration when you decide how much you're going to bond.
If we get it, if the appropriation is done, we should take the money out of, say, the undesignated fund for the 250, the extra money.
Well, that's your.
But I'm just saying that's what's going to, the committee knows that's got to happen. If we're going to go for the whole thing, This is what I want to hear from the committee. Scott, you've had your hand.
Yeah, I'm in support of everything. The only question with the 250 from the undesignated fund, the timing of that versus what you talked about with the first payment. I guess what I would want to avoid a scenario where we're on the hook for $500,000 at the same time.
Exactly. I said that today.
And so I guess partly like, why not bond for that as well? Or I just want to make sure that would be my only concern with everything we're saying.
And there's all kinds of things out there. Someone said, let's bond just $1 million and put the rest of it. I'm not in favor of that because our cash, our undesignated fund, we have a lot of projects out there.
Well, and that's where my sensitivity is.
We have to talk to bond council.
My gut is to bond more than less because I don't want to drain that fund.
That's what I have to hear tonight. Because when we go to bond council, we go to the mayor, we go to the treasurer, CPA committee is feeling, if we have to bond 2.25 because we need the cash. And why do we need the cash? We just heard there's $1 million coming for affordable housing. That's a big thing for me too. That's as big to me as this project. So all of this is dependent on what bond council says, what the payment would be. Now, if we have to pay $275 a year, the one thing that I want everybody to know is our revenue is extremely high compared to past years. The match is better and our tax revenue is higher. We are bringing in more funds. Plus, we haven't gotten those big ticket item requests, and I knock on wood, we're going to get a bunch of them now. Watch. I know that the pool needs to be fixed. There's things that the Park and Rec Department mentioned, and we have the affordable housing costs. But these seem to take place over a number of years. I believe we can afford the 3.5. That's my take. I'd like to hear from the council. You're authorizing myself and Greg, because of his knowledge, he's going to come with me to see the mayor. I need that authorization to go for that. And to hear from you, how much should we try for bonding? Scott says 2.25 to keep our cash. I'm not opposed to that. It's just more interest. It's more time. We have to find out.
But I mean, I'm saying that as a gut without the information that you're asking to get. So I want to see that information.
And on June 16th, we're going to make a final decision.
Yeah.
But are we okay? Number one, are we okay with 3.5 million? Number two, you're authorizing myself and Greg and Jamie to go to bond council and the treasurer and say how much it's going to cost, how can we structure this? And I have no problem with any other people coming. Joe, are you raising your hand?
No, so,
I thought you were waving at.
no. So CPA can bond independently. Are you thinking that this is going to be a city bond?
No, it has to be a CPA bond. And the other thing to remember is, God forbid, the city residents vote to remove the CPA. We're on the hook for this money until it's paid off. That'll never happen.
No, I think it's gonna.
None of you will ever allow that to happen, right? We're not going to vote the CPA out of the city.
It can get packaged with another city bond though.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Just to respond to the question, the city could structure a bond issue that contains CPA and general fund and enterprise fund if it chooses to. It would be separated in the paperwork so that they knew what the payments were from each source.
And the mayor may want to do this because she's about to bond the rest of the money for the school. And it may be better for the city to bond it all at once. I don't know. We have a tremendously good rating because we have great stabilization funds. So that's a biggie why we want to do that now. I still want to hear from people, 3.5 million, that's 500,000 more than we committed to a while back. The inflationary costs are real. I hear Burns on that, and I feel we can afford it. What do you guys think?
So my question is, what exactly are we on the hook for if this doesn't work? This doesn't happen.
It stays in our bank account getting interest until there's a contract signed. A contract can't be signed with contractors until all the money's in place. So the fact that you're worried about what if it doesn't happen, well, we're not giving any money out if that ever happens, right, Mike?
Yeah, and essentially the city reimburses city space after they've made the payment to the contractor. So if there's no contract, there are no payments to be reimbursed.
But that's very important. There's a big grant agreement that has to be signed by City Space that's put out by Hadel, our auditor. And the grant agreement states no funds can be expended. And Mike Owens, the procurement officer, just said to me, You don't have to worry about, you can go out to bid without all the money in place, but you can't sign a contract until all the money is in place. And that's critical. And if it takes longer, it takes longer.
Well,
But the money being authorized is a big, right?
Cost goes up.
How long was it? Yeah.
just so you're aware, generally speaking, you sign contracts within 30 days of the bid. So it's not like we can say, hey, we've got the bid, can you guys start doing this?
He mentioned that, but it's not untypical for you to wait. He said it has, we've waited. I mean, how can you put it out to bid?
The contractor won't hold their price.
They won't hold it.
Not right
They're
now,
only
anyway.
gonna hold the price for a limited period.
I understand that, but how can you sign a contract if you don't have all your funds in place?
That's why we're asking you to get them in place.
We can only get our part in place. I'm talking about the funds that you're with.
That's okay, because without our part, we can't touch your funds. So you're not at, the city's not at any kind of risk.
My point is, you want to go out to bid, and you can't go out to bid until we give you our funds. Great, that's done. Once we authorize the bond, once the city council authorizes.
Then we're good.
Right, but if you go out to bid, and you're saying, we want to sign a contract with the contractor that we want within 30 days, my question for that is, what if you don't have all your money in?
Well, we won't go out to bid.
Okay, so that's a biggie to me, because I thought you wanted to go out to bid before you had all the money in place.
Can't.
Okay, that's new. That's something I misunderstood.
We can't, so we phased out the first part of the project. That's the only part we can phase out. The rest of the project has to stay together as one project.
So you're hoping you can go out to bid, but you're gonna wait until you get that 6.6 million in place with our money and your money.
Correct.
So here's the timing question, because I'm just getting a little confused with the timing part. So you had a start date of 4/23, which is a year from now, right?
But the construction, so the RFP, we were hoping to start the process based on what we've experienced with the phase one. It's taken us this long to get everything in place before we can get the bids out. So it won't be until March, maybe April before those actual bids come in.
So we'll begin the bid solicitation process probably in February.
Okay. Okay.
You're assuming you're gonna have all your funds in place by then.
It's like January, the end of January.
Yeah, so at the end of the year, you're going to have it. Everything's got to be in place funding wise for you by the end of the year.
So the thing that concerns me is that state bond, and we're hoping that with our new governor, that'll be released pretty quickly, but that's part of your funding scenario. So,
It is part of our funding scenario.
well, State Senator Vilas has indicated that they're not going to do it until the new administration. So we'll push for that as soon as there's a new governor. We're hoping it's a certain attorney general, but anyway.
And this is just my ignorance of municipal bonds. The interest starts accruing the minute, like, when the money starts getting drawn down, does the interest start accruing, or does it accrue right from the, right?
So when the bonds are issued,
The bonds are
there's an
issued.
issue date
Yep.
for the bond.
Yep.
And the payments start at that date.
Can we delay
The first payment is generally, well, it depends how it's structured. Historically, the first payment is 6 months later.
Okay.
Oh, that's so good to know. Oh,
Well,
God.
Yeah,
Depends on how
can't
it's
speak for what's happening today.
Right.
So,
Depends on how it's.
More
structured.
experience than I do, Mike.
but generally speaking, it's 2 payments a year.
Okay.
We generally structured them to be declining interest, fixed principal.
Yep.
But
Whatever's in the best
however it
interest.
gets structured by this administration is how it gets.
That's helpful information just in terms of that 6 months and understanding
But the interest begins accruing.
right then. So you have 6 months of interest you have to pay on that first payment.
So in theory, in theory, then we're on the hook for the interest, no matter what.
But Mike, just to clarify, it starts accruing when we pull the money. I mean, when we issue the bond.
Issue the bond.
We get authorization for the bonding, you guys go out to bid. Okay, we're gonna start construction, we issue the bond. That's when the interest.
However the city decides to structure that could work. City Space needs the city council's vote authority for bonding for your operations to be able to say, yes, the money's available.
Absolutely, because
It
once
has to be in
we,
the bank, it just has to be available. You're authorized to expend the money.
right, and the interest doesn't happen until the bond is actually
If the
issued.
city decides they're gonna issue the bond in March, because it's more favorable, then they can. The city looks at it and says, well, with a possible recession coming on, it's going to make sense for us to issue the bond in September. That's
Next September, not this September.
no, this could be this September. I don't know what your bond counsel is going to suggest. In the past, I've experienced urging from bond counsel to do it sooner rather than later.
Okay. Well, here's the thing that Scott and I are.
Because you're going to end up with the interest cost, whether you bond it now or you bond it.
The first payment is all I'm concerned about,
Yeah.
because the first payment, if it could happen after July 1, 2023, then it becomes part of that. You know how we've been saving $250 every year?
Yes.
That becomes part of the scenario. And if we issue the bond later, like say March, then that might happen. I don't know. But as you said, if they say, hey, you're going to lose a lot of money if you wait, then we have to take that into consideration.
And you should speak to bond counsel, but you can structure the bond offering with whatever date you want. You can offer a bond to a buyer with whatever constraints you want to place in it. There may be changes in your ultimate cost if the constraints are costly to the buyer, to whoever buys the bond, but there's nothing in the law that says the first payment has to be 6 months from now. The first payment could be 2 months from now. It could be 8 months from now. It's how you structure the offer as to where the bidder gives you a price. I'll buy these bonds for 2.3% the first year, 3.5% the second year, 8% the third, or 2% the. If you look at the structure of the current school bond, it's rather interesting the way that one was structured. It's non-traditional. Doesn't mean it's right or wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong, but it took advantage, I think, of some timing issues. And so your bond counsel will help you figure out how to structure it to meet your needs and hopefully ours as well.
And to go to the question of making sure we have our cash in place, we may bond more because the payment is coming earlier than we had expected. In other words, a lot of these questions have to be answered. But I'm hearing that's a good point. What Mike is saying is they're going to tell us when we should do this based on what's going to save the city the most interest, the most cost. And I think we have to find out. And I can't tell you how much. I had a great conversation with Greg. I'm so happy he's on this committee because he knows a lot about this.
Will bond counsel give us some sort of layout, timeline, something to kind of simplify?
I've asked them to give us paperwork.
Yeah, because I really feel like it's the timing that I'm struggling with, when funds are coming down, when funds are needed, when, just the big picture. I'm having a hard time kind of wrapping my head around it.
It really, it may be that they can give us an example, but not necessarily a final. It may be we want to wait because of the market, but I don't know.
But nonetheless, they need a vote from us, from council, and council can sit on that vote, it sounds like, for as long as they need to before the bond can get issued.
The administration
Right,
can sit on it.
Not council.
right.
The city council needs to take
The vote,
affirmative
and
action.
then you guys are a go. Once you have that city council vote, you're good, but the administration can do the bonding when it's the most favorable to the city.
So.
Am I understanding that right? Okay.
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
all right, okay.
And we're going to find out that information before we vote on this fund, because we don't know. And I'm going to try and get that meeting set up as soon as I can. So 3.5 million. That's the first question. Anybody have a problem with that? Anybody want to talk to that? I'm okay with it.
The longer we wait, the higher it's going to be anyway, so.
Obviously, inflation is just south. I'm hoping the supply chain issues get better when we start building, but that would be a lot of Irish luck.
Yep.
We are going out with the phase 1 bid. Sub bids open next week. General bids open June 7th. That'll give us a good handle on where inflation.
How hungry are construction people? They're not
They're
hungry.
busy.
They're busy.
They're
They can't
busy.
get
Well,
things.
they have the same issues everyone else does. They have supply chain issues. They have labor issues. They're in the same world that all the rest of us are in. But we have had some good response. So we've required contractors, if they want to bid, to come to pre-bid meetings, and we've had 2 meetings, good responses in both meetings from all trades. So we're confident that we're going to get some bidders.
Well, I'll do my best for the committee to get this bond council going. So I'd like a vote this evening to commit to $3.5 million for this. You know, we haven't voted on finalizing the deal. We're just voting to, like we voted on 3 million to commit. We're committing to 3.5 million. I need that vote before, so I can say to the mayor, the CPA committee voted on that. So someone want to make that motion?
An appropriation request? More like a straw poll?
No, the commitment is 3.5 million. We had a commitment of 3 million. It's not an appropriation request at all. We're going to do that next meeting. And that'll be 3.2 because you already have 250. The point is, we approved 3 million way back. I'm asking the committee to approve 3.5 million, an increase to 3.5 million. Bottom line expenditure from CPA. Does that make sense, Scott?
Did we never actually approved 3 million? Didn't we just?
We did a letter. We did a letter.
That's what I'm saying, but that's different than what. Yeah. So, right.
So I'm
Is
just,
this,
That's the same thing, I think is what he's asking.
you're asking for the same type of.
Same type of thing.
With a different number, saying the
it all it has to be is in the minutes that we are approving $3.5 million, an increase to 3.5 million for our commitment to City Spaces Old Town Hall project.
That's not what we're
I'll say our one-stop grants are due,
Can you speak up?
our one-stop grants are due on end of May or June. So having that commitment in the minutes would be very helpful to that application.
Okay, so can I have
To approve 3.5 million.
to commit to 3.5 million?
Before a second, I don't know, because it's the same discussion before we move on. So to me, there's two big variables. Obviously, what the bond council funding they suggest. And then we have the other big variable for CPA is the variability in state matching for CPAs. So I would like to see, like, I don't know if you call it a stress test or whatever, if we say, okay, this is our worst matching, this is our best matching, let's take in between, are these payments going to be doable for the CPA? Because we obviously.
Well, it has
So
to,
we cannot use the state match to apply it to any bonding. The bonding can only, the maximum bonds debt service is whatever we take in local revenue.
Oh, really?
Only local.
So if we're at
Oh.
$100,000 a year, it's our bonding has to assume we get a 0%.
Oh, so we can only bond on what our local.
yeah, but that's.
But where it does come into effect is how much money do we have beyond that?
Right, for other projects.
So, yeah, right.
And
That's what it
to be
does.
honest with you, Joe, we've had a great 5 years. Since we've done this 250, we have not had a problem funding other projects. And we've done that now. This will be the 5th year. So I'm feeling very confident that we can do this. Plus, unless taxes go way down, which I don't expect, our taxes are going up every year, assessments, because the value of homes in this city are outrageous. So I'm not worried about taxes to pay that are 3%. So we have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
Second.
The motion is to commit to raise the commitment to 3.5 million for CPA's Old Town Hall.
Correct.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? You have a unanimous. I'm sure Greg would also say it, okay? So just to make it clear, I'm gonna try to get the bond council as soon as we can. I got it. Mayor, Hadel, new treasurer, Greg and I together with them and the bond council and say, we need to know how this bond is gonna work so we can make a commitment. Now, so City Space knows your job is done. You're gonna come back on June 16th and you're gonna say, okay, where are we? But we'll deal with how we're gonna fund this is our job. We just have to find a way to 3.5 million. It may be that we bond less, we bond more. We don't know.
And I'm just going to put this out there. Are there any other city sources besides CPA that can be committed to bring the bond amount down? I don't know. I don't expect you to have an answer, but I'm just putting it out there as.
I have a rumor
Okay.
because, should I say this, Burns? The mayor said the other day, maybe. There's infrastructure money coming in. This
Through ARPA, I'm guessing.
ARPA and
Yeah,
other funds.
I mean.
State has bought money like on the floor.
Yeah, I know. That's why I'm
And the
asking.
mayor may be considering that. for us.
I think if the city would be, and then you can bring this back to your city councilors, that I think that if there was additional other money that could be put towards the project to reduce the amount that has to be bonded from this committee, I think that would be a favorable approach. Maybe it's the 500,000 that was just added to the budget.
There's nothing to say that you guys can't write an email to the mayor saying that. Why not? She knows my point of view. I want this project to happen, so, but I can't wrestle with her. Give us more money. Anyway.
This project, is part of the master plan. I was looking at the master plan the other day because that's what I do in my spare time.
If you have spare time, you have something more for you to do.
And it's one of the biggest points on the list, and we've done really well. It was written in 2008, and we've checked a lot of boxes off those lists. And
Right next to affordable housing.
right next to affordable housing. And this project really is part of the puzzle piece with affordable housing and creates affordable space for community and the arts. So once we have that affordable housing in place, you have affordable space, if we're working together, and that's treating really good.
I said this before, just to defend the mayor in a little bit and what we're up against, because I know what we're up against in this city. We have a wastewater treatment plant that needs work. We have sewer and water infrastructure that's tremendously bad. We're redeveloping Rotary. We're doing Union Street. These are funds that got to come from someplace. So ARPA money is going a lot of places. If we can get 250,000, like I think they got in North, where did they get that? Northampton, someplace just got that ARPA money. Oh, Holyoke for their project. That'd be great. But whatever we get would be incredible because we have so many places for these funds. So I just want to say that.
Absolutely. And, as you participate on this board, if you have any thoughts on how we can find other funds, if you hear of anything, let us know. Keep your ears open. We don't want to cut to just one source. We can't. We have many sources.
Well, there's been a lot of, when we started this out, I was amazed to find that projects like this were funded by the CPA in excess of much more millions than we have in communities not bigger than us. So it really is dependent on, these kind of projects are dependent on Community Preservation Act funds. That's exactly what they're for. Because it's talk about benefiting, you're talking about a little playground to be a benefit to the community. Or affordable housing would be a benefit to the community. This is a huge benefit to the community. So I'm just saying.
Some people with little kids also think playgrounds are huge. But I'm not to try to be out of my lane.
Well, let's just make a commitment. Part of the grant thing is Burns has to have children's theater at least 5 times a year. There you go. Harry.
I got a question for you. Would it be possible to put a scheduled events in the, like a reminder in the Sprinkler Union, what's going on at the old town hall?
Where?
The reminder, we get that reminder in the union every month on Thursdays,
Yeah.
so you know what's going on at the, I'm just,
Yeah, so
I
part
don't know
of,
what the hell that would cost, but it'd be nice to know what's going on.
that's a good point. So part of what we do is people book the space on the first floor, and part of what we do is creating skill building for anybody that books the space. So if they have a public event, we teach them how to market their event so that they learn how to do a press release and send it out. So they're individually doing that.
Yeah, it'd be really nice when you pick up the paper and see a little box there and be, the schedule of what's going on.
That reminder has blossomed into pretty big.
It's kind of cool.
There's one more question if you mind. So Perfect World is all done. It's beautiful. And that people want to rent it. Does that income go to city space? And you continue just to pay the city rent, or or are you going to be basically very cheap, no profit involved, or how do you see those spaces being used and financed?
So as part of our business plan, we are creating people can come in and use the space for all kinds of uses, right? They book the space. We also provide programming. We've launched programming this year that connects low income and BIPOC artists who are from the Western Massachusetts region, specifically the Pioneer Valley, and to use the space. So we have those two elements. The funding goes back to city space to help support the building itself. So the building is a beast, and we have to do all of the upkeep on the building.
And operate it,
and
pay
operate.
the utility bills, all of that.
And
Insurance.
and part of our business plan is that we're volunteers right now. We know that's not sustainable in long-term practice. So in order to create, a place where people can access skilled folks to help support what they're doing and support the space itself, we will have 2 positions that will be paid. That will be creating 2 employees that will be, new to this income within our city. So
Yeah, I think it's great. I mean, I think I like the concept of helping disadvantaged groups and teaching people. I think it's a wonderful use of that.
right, and it's, we've seen so many performing arts organizations, our spaces pop up throughout the region, and this will be a place for live events of all sorts. So if DSP that does Gateway, their performances wanted to present shows there, they could, but also it'd be a place for people within our community to access space. So it's really a hub for people who live here, not just a place for artists from outside of the area to come to.
And just to, I guess, finish that, is as a nonprofit, it's our intent to work in the black, just.
Right.
We can't work in the red. We have to be able to operate the building. We have to bring in enough funds to pay for the overhead, to pay for staff to operate the building, to make sure they're booking and make sure that people are cleaning up after, they rent and, so there's some operational costs that have to be covered, but it's not the organization's intent for this to be a profit center. And essentially the first floor is kind of run that way since 2006 when City Space first started renting it. The rents have been affordable for the people that are in there. Flywheel was in that space for a very long time, offering similar sorts of use, not the same, but similar. And City Space has never really made a profit on the operations, but they've been able to keep in the black, which is what we're intending.
Well, good luck on the fundraising.
Thank you.
What do you think we can do? You want another letter to the editor? Just
Tax credits. How are you going to use the tax credits when those come in?
The netting that's on the exterior of the building is $1 million project. So that's where we're thinking that's going to get back.
And we may come back. Just for help with that.
I got enough. To the bank.
Thank God.
All right.
Thank you.
can I have a motion to adjourn, please?
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.